Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at weather next week, 10 days in today's video. It's going to take us to around the 22nd of April. So we've got this gloomy, cold weather still going on today. It's going to stay with us for another day or so, but it is going to start improving soon now. So in the south tomorrow, actually, it will start to brighten as the wind begins to turn from easterlies to southerlies. But it'll be actually on Saturday, but most parts of the country will finally start to brighten up and get some spells of sunshine coming through. And then that leads us to what could be a very warm spell of weather next week. Been documenting this a lot in the videos just recently. We could see temperatures going up into the mid-20s Celsius for time through the middle part of next week. Not sure how long it lasts, but for a time, it does look as though it's going to be turning very warm indeed through the course of next week. I mentioned a question mark about the final week of April. I'll talk you through that in a second. We're going to start off, though, by having a look at Central England temperature. This is provisional from Hadley up to yesterday, 11th of April. We're coming out at 7.8 degrees, an anomaly of just over 1 degree above average. So it has been, perhaps a bit surprisingly, it has been a warmer than average start to April. And that's including all these cold, grey, miserable days that we've been having. But of course, what's been going on is that whilst the days have been cold, and they have been cold on average by day, by night the temperature hasn't really changed. So I've actually kept maximum and minimum temperatures at a very similar level, and so nights have tend to be actually quite warm, milder than average, but by day it has been cold on average, and the upshot is that we are coming out at the moment provisionally around 1 degree warmer than average. I expect that to shoot up as well next week, because we are going to pull up some very warm air, as I've been saying, through the course of next week. These are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the Penn State University website. We've got the E70F here on the top, and the GFS, which I'll have a look at in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to high pressure and blue to low pressure. So in the 7 to 10 day time frame, this takes us to the 22nd of April. The E70F has this big ridge of above average heights, high pressure sitting over and to the east of the country, with a trough of below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. So the jet stream and the flow does something rather like that. We're placed onto the warm side of the jet stream, but with that high pressure there would be a lot of dry weather. That high pressure is being put under pressure, though. The jet stream is coming in from off the Atlantic in that sort of fashion, and so it is gradually eroding and nibbling away at that ridge of high pressure. So that's the reason I'm rather unsure about how long this high pressure spell is going to last. This is the GFS. It's very similar, but actually it's more progressive in breaking down this ridge. So this is the ridge of above average heights that's going to bring us our first spell of summer warmth next week. That's to our east in the 7 to 10 day time frame. We've got below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic, and we're also raising pressure up over Greenland with this. So we're doing something like that with the flow and with the jet stream. And I can tell you that actually you're going to see the operational run of the GFS in a moment, but it in its extended range, it does build heights up over Greenland, and it does start to pull in cold air for the final week of April. So yes, we only get the warm up next week. How long it lasts, I'm not sure. And could we actually go from summer next week to maybe back to winter type conditions in the final week of April? That will be interesting, to say the least, to see how that plays out. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles. We're looking at London today. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for London. Starting off drier than average, as I've been explaining, and milder than average too. As I've been explaining, the temperatures in terms of the upper air temperatures are above average at the moment, but we're not realising that potential because of the easy wind bringing in all the cloud and the cold air from off the North Sea. Low level cold air will change the wind direction over the weekend from easterlies to southerlies, and so we're going to start to realise the potential of the milder and average upper air temperatures at the weekend, with temperatures lifting into mid-teens Celsius. Next week, we lift the temperature up even more. So we go up to around 10 degrees at 850 HPA, which will be enough to lift temperatures into the mid-20s Celsius. Now, beyond that, it looks like we're going to cool those temperatures down again as we go into the final week of April. You'll notice this thick green line just here. That is the operational run of the GFS, a midnight run, which I'm going to show you in a moment. That actually turned quite cold for the final week of April this morning. It is one of the coldest members, so it's a bit of an outlier, but that's what is happening with that particular run. In terms of precipitation, so I've got a few rainfall spikes coming up over the next few days, but generally it's a drying trend into next week. Drying trend 2, maybe getting more unsettled as we get through to the final week of April. These are how the surface temperatures are looking for London. So starting off around 10 degrees Celsius, quite disappointing with temperatures. But over the weekend, they start to warm up. And that warming trend continues into next week, where temperatures peak at maybe even a little bit above for London, 20 degrees Celsius. Later next week and into the final week of April, we find the temperatures sliding down again. It's cooling off. And we have got some ensemble members actually in this final week of April that are producing some quite cold and perhaps even frosty nights as well. So warmer and then perhaps cooler for the final week of April, how the ensembles are looking. Temperature anomalies for next week coming out warmer than average for most parts of Europe. The UK and Ireland is included in that from the 11th through to the 19th of April. Precipitation anomalies are coming out drier than average, so warmer and drier with more in way of sunshine. It's going to be a very nice spell of weather we've got coming up next week. This is how the midnight run of the GFS was looking this morning then, and we've got high pressure over Scandinavia with low pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic on Monday. So still a bit unsettled for Monday, but by Tuesday and into Wednesday, that ridge is taking over the pattern with this low pressure in the central Atlantic being blocked. The jet stream is going something like that, so we're starting to pull in much warmer air from southern climes as we go into the middle part of next week. That gives us our burst of summer. That's how we look on Thursday next week, again in that very warm south to southeasterly flow with the high pressure centered to our east. Now by Friday next week, this is going into the unreliable time frame of the model, but by Friday next week, we're beginning to just start to wobble the atmosphere a little bit, you'll notice. Heights are starting to rise a bit up over Greenland. We're starting to get this low pressure to our west and also to the south. That looks a bit thundery, that low pressure that's coming out of Spain and into Biscay. So by the time you go through to Saturday, running up towards day 10, we're finding low pressures generally taking over. May well be that this ridge is being broken down too quickly, but if it comes off like this, we might be facing a bit of a thundery breakdown. Although it's only April, we might be seeing a bit of thunder there on Saturday, the 21st of April, which then goes into quite an unsettled pattern by day 10. Sunday the 22nd, we've properly broken that ridge. And we're back to low pressure. And if I just run you through the extended range, what happens is that low pressure zips across the country with heights rising over Greenland. We start to pull down much colder air from the north, on the northern side of this area of low pressure. This is in the unreliable time frame of the model, but it does turn quite cold then as we go into the final week of April. There's the upper air temperature showing cold air returning yet again from the north, and then we go into a very unsettled spell of weather as we go further into the last week of April. So that's a big temperature contrast just there, with cold air coming down from the north, warm air trying to push up again from the south. There'll be an active weather front in that sort of region, which could produce a lot of very heavy rain, maybe a little bit of snow for the Welsh Mountains and for the Pennines, but it's too far away for that kind of detail. And then that low pressure clears away to the east, and we go back into cold air from the north once again, although you'll notice for much of Central Europe actually there's a heat wave going on with very warm or hot air coming out of North Africa. So it's a really changeable situation this last week of April, but there is a bit of cold potential in there after next week's warm-up. East MDF, finally, let's have a look on Monday. Still a bit unsettled on Monday. It's going to take its time to settle down, but by the time we get through to the middle part of next week, high pressure is taking over the pattern, and that takes us into a spell of very warm weather into the second half of next week, around the middle to second half of next week. I think we get temperatures at least of below 20s, possibly even to the mid-20s Celsius. This is Friday, 20th of April, where, again, we've got just this low pressure beginning to move out of Spain and Biscay, heading northwards. That could be hinting at a bit of thunder there, you know, as we go through to the sort of end of this period, sort of days 8, 9 and 10. That's how things look as we get to day 10, where much more of an anticyclonic influence than the GFS. So we've got high pressure still sort of there to our southwest. Low pressure is up to the northwest. It's a bit more unsettled. We're bringing a firmer jet stream through like that, but it's not cold. It will still be, even in the south, even in the north, I should say, relatively warm. And in the south, it would probably still be really quite warm indeed, even at day 10. So less of a breakdown with the ECM up to day 10. The GFS, you go for a real breakdown there between days 8 and 10. 8, 9 and days 8, 9 and 10 do have some thundery potential. And then the GFS wants to turn things cold from the north again for the final week of April. That's a really long way off. But there's been these hints about this last week of April for a long time now. I've been talking about this seemingly for several weeks. Will we get one last blast of cold northerlies in this last week of April? It's to be determined, but the possibility is there anyway. But before we get to that, I mean, that's a long way off. Before we get to that, we are going to get our warm-up next week. So summer will be giving us its first sort of signs, and it's on its way next week with temperatures, at least for a day or two next week, going into the low to mid-20s Celsius. And as far as this week is concerned, still very grey, gloomy and cold at the moment. Things will start to improve by the weekend. Right, it's German Friday tomorrow, so I'll have a look at the weather for the month ahead with Japanese CFS V2 models. Come back for that. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.